When Rome's banners vanished beyond the Rhine, the silence that followed was not empty, it was alive. The echo of iron boots faded, but the ground still trembled with memory. Roads that once carried legions dissolved into mud and moss. Marble crumbled, villas rotted into their foundations, and in their place rose the patient green breath of the forest. This was the heart of Europe in the 5th century, a crossroads where memory met wilderness. And somewhere between the rivers Sala and Unstrut, between the shadows of the Harz Mountains and the far mist of the Rhine, a new name began to whisper through the trees: Thuringia. No one built it by decree. There were no charters, no proclamations, no marble gates announcing its birth. Thuringia emerged the way moss overtakes stone, slowly, silently, until one day it simply was. Its people were not Romans, yet not wholly Germanic either. They were the offspring of survival, the descendants of farmers who never fled, soldiers who laid down their shields, wanderers who found in the wreckage of empire a chance to begin again. They gathered in valleys and forest clearings, rebuilding from fragments of two worlds, the discipline of Rome and the freedom of the tribes. Archaeologists find traces of this beginning even now. Fragments of pottery stamped with Roman designs beside crude handmade vessels, iron nails forged in a collapsing empire lying beside stone tools older than memory. It was as though the old world and the new were holding hands across centuries, refusing to let go. These early Thuringians lived close to the land. They hunted, traded amber, smelted iron, and carved charms from bone. Their homes were wooden halls roofed with reeds, built not for grandeur but endurance. And at night, when fog gathered low and the forest sang, they told stories, not to pass the time, but to explain why the stars still burned after Rome's fire had gone out. In their telling, the world was not ending. It was transforming. The gods of stone temples had withdrawn, and in their place rose spirits of oak and water, wolf and wind. Every thunderclap was a message. Every fallen tree, an omen. They believed that life continued in circles. Kingdoms fell, but rivers remembered, and the soil carried the memory of every footstep laid upon it. By the middle of the 5th century, scattered settlements began to unite, not under an emperor, but under necessity. Bands of warriors swore loyalty to local chieftains. Farms became villages, and villages became realms bound by trade, by war, and by faith. The chroniclers of later centuries, men writing under the banner of Frankish kings, called them Thuringians, a name likely older than their own history. To the outside world, they were another tribe among many. But to those who lived within that shadowed heart of Europe, they were something else, a people between worlds, keeping the last spark of the old order alive while shaping something entirely new. No grand palace marked their rise, yet stories speak of wooden fortresses built upon ridges overlooking misted valleys. Inside, fires burned day and night as warriors gathered to drink, to sing, and to plan. They spoke of alliances and raids, of gods that demanded courage and land that demanded reverence. Historians still debate whether Thuringia was truly a kingdom or merely a union of clans held together by fear, faith, and blood. But by the time Rome's memory had faded to rumor, the Thuringians were already building something enduring, a culture that would outlast the empires that ignored it. They had no marble, but they had belonging. No senators, but storytellers. No legions, but loyalty. And in that loyalty something ancient stirred, a sense that the land itself was their temple. It was said that when the morning mists rose over the Sala River, one could hear faint music drifting through the trees, not human but something older. The locals called it the breathing of the forest, the voice of spirits who once spoke to kings. Whether myth or memory, it captured the essence of what Thuringia would become. A kingdom not of walls, but of whispers. Not of conquest, but of continuity. And so, as the last Roman outposts fell and maps grew blank, Thuringia rose quietly from the spaces in between. A realm without borders, born of ruins and rooted in earth, where the forest itself was the first to awaken and remember. When the morning fog drifted through the woods, the people of Thuringia believed it was the breath of their ancestors. They saw no border between the living and the dead, only a curtain of mist, thin enough to step through if one knew the way. Before the word sin ever reached their ears, they already knew of balance, of giving back what you took, of speaking to the world as if it were listening. Their forests were not empty. They were alive. The Thuringians believed that every tree had a pulse, every stone a memory, every stream an ear that could carry a promise to the unseen. To cut an oak without asking permission was to invite misfortune. To pour milk into a spring was to thank the spirit that guarded it. Archaeologists still find traces of these gestures. Clay cups buried near old wells, silver brooches found beside streams, animal bones arranged in quiet circles. They left little written language, but their rituals were their record. Each gesture, each offering spoke a truth about how they saw existence, not as domination, but as conversation. When storms rolled across the hills, they saw not chaos but dialogue, the voice of gods echoing through the earth, the thunder of destiny awakening the soil. And when lightning split a tree, they whispered that the sky had spoken. In later centuries, missionaries would call these beliefs pagan. They would chop down sacred groves and build churches upon them, thinking they were erasing superstition. But time revealed otherwise, for in those same places, people still came to pray, still lit candles, still touched the ground before leaving. The names changed. The reverence remained. Holy wells were once springs of spirits. Saints replaced old gods, and the rhythm of worship simply shifted from moonlight to morning bells. One story tells of Queen Radegund, a Thuringian noblewoman said to have walked barefoot through the woods at night, seeking peace between the spirits of the fallen and the faith of the living. When she later joined the Christian world, she did not abandon her people's ways, she blended them. Her prayers were whispered in Latin, but her heart still listened to the forest. It is said that when she died, the trees around her village shed their leaves out of season, as if mourning the end of something sacred. By the dawn of the 6th century, Thuringia had become more than a gathering of clans. It had a pulse, a rhythm of unity. Its chieftains built wooden strongholds atop hills that caught the first light of dawn. Below them, rivers carried trade, amber, iron, salt, and secrets. Thuringian artisans crafted jewelry of astonishing complexity, blending Roman precision with tribal imagination. Fibulae shaped like ravens, rings etched with spirals symbolizing eternity, bronze amulets carved with the likeness of wolves, not beasts of terror, but guardians of the soul. Among them rose King Herminafrid, a man both admired and feared. He ruled from his hall at Thuringia, a place long lost to history, but described by later writers as a city of wood and firelight. He was said to possess the cunning of a Roman general and the restlessness of a forest wolf. Herminafrid sought to unite Thuringia's scattered tribes into a single force strong enough to stand against the Franks in the west and the Saxons to the north. For a time, he succeeded. Caravans from distant lands passed through his realm, paying tribute and carrying word that a new kingdom had risen in the heart of the old world. But power in those centuries was never eternal. It was borrowed. And the gods, old or new, were quick to demand it back. The Franks, fierce and newly Christianized, watched Thuringia with cold calculation. To them, this forest kingdom was a pagan echo of a time they wished to bury. They saw wealth in its rivers, pride in its people, and danger in its independence. So they began their work, not only with swords, but with marriages and whispers. One alliance, one betrayal at a time, they wove a net around Herminafrid's court. It was not an army that first broke Thuringia, it was blood. Family turned against family, brothers against brothers, while the Franks watched from across the Rhine. When they finally marched eastward, the fighting was brief but brutal. Chroniclers describe a battle near the river Unstrut where red waters carried the fallen downstream. No one knows how many died or whether Herminafrid fell in battle or in betrayal, but the kingdom was consumed by flame. Those who survived fled into the mountains or vanished into legend. The conquerors built churches where shrines had stood, and in their scrolls they wrote, "The Thuringians are no more." But the soil disagreed. Beneath every church they built, stones older than their faith remained. Pagan stones, turned inward as if hiding their faces. And in the forests, the people kept telling stories by firelight. They spoke of a king who would return when the rivers ran clear again, of a queen who sang to the moon, of treasures buried beneath the hills that glowed on nights when the wind carried the scent of rain. Centuries later, archaeologists would dig into those hills and find the bones of warriors buried with gold, amber, and horses. Some graves held mirrors, Roman-made, but placed there long after Rome had vanished. Others contained runic charms beside Christian crosses, proof that even faith itself had blended. To modern scholars, this was contradiction. To the Thuringians, it was truth. The world was never one thing. It was always becoming. They were artists as much as fighters. Their jewelry rivaled the finery of Byzantium. Their ironwork outlasted their enemies. Each artifact uncovered tells a quiet story, not of defeat, but of endurance. A kingdom may fall, but a way of seeing the world can outlive any crown. Over time, Thuringia disappeared from maps, absorbed by larger powers. First the Franks, then the Saxons, then the tides of empire that came and went like seasons. Yet its soul remained in the rhythm of the land itself. The very heart of Central Europe, the green belt of forest and hill that once held this kingdom, still carries its name. Villages echo old words. Rivers whisper forgotten syllables. The people who walk there, without even knowing, trace the same paths their ancestors once did, guided by the same sun and stars. Even the language holds their ghost. Certain German words for forest, sacrifice, and honor bear roots that stretch back to the tongue spoken in Thuringia's wooden halls. The myth of the eternal return, that nothing truly ends, only changes form, may have been their greatest gift to Europe. In later centuries, poets would dream of Thuringia as a green heart, a sacred middle realm between the civilized and the wild. To them, it represented not loss, but memory. The proof that even when nations fall, their stories sink into the soil, waiting to be found again. Modern archaeologists say that every time they open a Thuringian grave, the air smells faintly of pine and smoke. They call it coincidence. But perhaps it is the breath of the old world, still exhaling through the cracks of time. Because Thuringia was never just a place. It was a bridge between belief and reason, between nature and rule, between the seen and the unseen. It was where the forest remembered the empire, and where humanity learned that silence, too, can speak. Every civilization leaves traces, some written, others buried, others still whispered by rivers that do not forget. Thuringia leaves us not with ruins, but with resonance. It teaches that power fades, but reverence endures. That soil is the oldest library, that even when names are erased, the land still calls them softly in the wind. And when you walk today through the valleys of modern Thuringia, through the fog, through the quiet hum of pine and stream, you might feel a faint vibration beneath your feet, like the heartbeat of something ancient that never truly died. The Romans once said that beyond their frontiers lay chaos. But perhaps beyond those frontiers lay something they could not understand. A kingdom not of stone or law, but of memory. A kingdom that refused to vanish. A kingdom that learned how to hide itself in silence. Thuringia, the heart that Europe forgot, but time remembered.